Hello everyone, and welcome to this year's BiblioShare presentation for TechForum 2022. This is, amazingly, our 15th year anniversary. I'm Tim Middleton, one of the project managers at BookNet Canada, and I remember so many of our past conferences, all of the amazing places we've been, people we've met, and concepts we've heard championed. Alongside all of these amazing thought leaders and brilliant new services, processes, and concepts, BookNet gets to humbly present our services, our products, and our observations about trends in publishing. It is an amazing vantage point that we have. Almost every year, I've had the privilege of telling people about BiblioShare, our data aggregation and distribution platform. Every year, I get to share with you the new services and applications that are being built for and with BiblioShare. But there's no need to tell you this year has been a special year, unlike any other year. We've had wildfires, floods, pandemics, protests, and the unfolding of increasingly horrific tragedies. One of the key differences for me at BookNet, and perhaps for everyone everywhere, is that I went into the beginning of the pandemic lockdowns with a lot of momentum. We had plans in place already and followed through on those as well as we could. The second year, at least to my mind, has been less momentous, a little more tedious, certainly disturbing, and absolutely, continually surprising. Actually, a fascinating time to be alive, as they say. BiblioShare had a quiet year in terms of feature set building. Aside from the pandemonium of the pandemic, we also had a very resource-intensive project in the works at BookNet. BiblioShare was involved a bit with this project from the sidelines. Of course, the project I'm talking about is our Catalyst and BTLF project, a collaborative endeavor with our Quebec sister organization, the BTLF, to help support both English and French language markets across this nation. BiblioShare played a small part acting as the support for this project to pull in the French language covers and sample files. You can see those numbers in the slide. That was all. We didn't have to really do much else, as our Catalyst and admin teams did all of the heavy lifting of requirement gathering, spec writing, and module building. But you can hear more about all of that from those teams. Another issue we got to resolve this past year had to do with the continual emergence of a strong indigenous supply chain. While the concept of an indigenous supply chain for us really has more to do with standards, where we were challenged in BiblioShare was to be able to resolve character issues that appeared in conjunction with providing support for Canadian Aboriginal languages. This problem affected data in our outgoing dataset, so would appear wherever organizations were pulling data from BiblioShare. This is a fairly common problem in the database world of character encoding and standards, and has become so much more visible to us as we seek to honor commitments to the calls of action coming out of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's report. This was not a quick fix for us, but I'm glad to say it appears we can and do support Aboriginal language diacriticals now. It's a small victory with big impact. And then, of course, much of my own personal focus has been on Shopify. We continue to receive a lot of requests for our bookstore builder app and continue to provide support to our many users of that app. One idea we started promoting with businesses a bit more who are using our app to import covers and bibliographic data for books was the idea of a sort of bundle of our Bibliomatic plugin and our Shopify app, and our integrated reporting to sales data. The sales data reporting is, of course, vitally important to the marketplace, but the BOM plugin, or Bibliomatic, and the Bookstore Builder app, while not an official bundle, can be used together to confirm the absence or presence of data when you are working in Shopify. For instance, if you are wondering if there is a cover for a title you are trying to import and you have Bibliomatic enabled, click on the icon, see if BiblioShare does have the data, is there a cover, and when was it last updated? All very useful information that can remove a lot of mystery from your workflows. And finally, one other potentially useful service that we provide is, in my opinion, underused, is our BISH asset service. By adding this service into your workflows, you would be able to troubleshoot your asset distribution, or perhaps if you are a wholesaler, do gap analysis on your holdings compared to BiblioShare, and then pull down what you are missing. Our BISH asset service will show you everything we have with regards to an ISBN. Is there a cover, an interior spread, any samples? What about a 2.1 record or a 3.0 record? Of course, you could also see where you have data that BiblioShare doesn't, and perhaps work that into a value prop or an opportunity. In the example above, we see that BiblioShare contains an ONYX 2.1 record, a cover image, and a position file. A position file is basically the publisher's inventory statement. So, as you can see, there wasn't a ton of feature building in BiblioShare this year. A few tweaks here, some bug fixes there, and a little behind-the-scenes improvements. And yet, BiblioShare was still grinding away all year long. And this is one of my favorite parts of giving this presentation every year at Tech Forum. It's what I call BiblioShare by the numbers. Because when all is said and done, and all the fixes made or broken in your ONYX data, your cover and interior distribution, what makes BiblioShare incredibly useful and vital is, of course, the data contained within its dataset. In 2021, we saw the BiblioShare ONYX 2.1 record set increase by 300,000 records. So nearing the end of our fiscal 2021 period, we see BiblioShare contains approximately 3.9 million ONYX 2.1 title records. For our ONYX 3.0 dataset, we saw an additional 156,000 records added in 2021 to bring that growing dataset up to 685,000 ONYX 3.0 records. Breaking that down a bit to see what the flow of data looks like year over year, we see that on average we received 1,249 new records per day, and nearly 135,000 records got updated every day. That seems to indicate that the creation of 2.1 records is on a slight decline when you look at it year over year, but it could easily indicate other things too that would require a bit more of a deep dive than we did for this presentation. Meanwhile, in the ONYX 3.0 dataset, we received and processed slightly more than last year, but take note that the 3.0 version of ONYX data continues to grow year over year. The number of records that received updates in the 3.0 data was slightly down, but there's nowhere to go but up regarding this dataset since, as you may have already calculated from the previous slides, our 3.0 dataset is only about 17% the size of our 2.1 dataset. So there's a lot of missing data for 3.0. We had a bit of a drop in the number of new accounts that got added to the platform, which kind of makes sense since this is a law of diminishing returns, unless we decide to start supporting international markets in BiblioShare. For now, we are not doing that. So we had 32 new 2.1 ONYX accounts, a drop of 66% year over year, and 12 new accounts that want to send us 3.0 data, a drop of 41%. So just a bit of context around these numbers, and perhaps it's blatantly obvious, but not all accounts are equal. Some accounts can provide hundreds of thousands of records, while others may only send one record. Another thing to keep in mind at this time of transition from 2.1 to 3.0 version data is that some companies can or will only send one version of ONIX. Currently in BiblioShare, we have to take both 2.1 and 3.0 files since the industry is not cut over completely yet, and there are still lots of companies out there that require 2.1 data from BiblioShare, including many of our own products. The new companies that were added into these three types of accounts in BiblioShare: 39 publisher accounts, 6 supplier accounts, and 27 web service accounts. Only suppliers and publishers send us data, in case you're wondering why these numbers don't mesh. Publisher type accounts allow a publisher, regardless of their size or number of records they have, to send us data that we can say that that publisher owns in BiblioShare, in particular sales rights. A supplier is really just a different word for distributor. These accounts send data that can contain many different publishers' ONIX data. In theory, if a supplier sends, say, something like measures that the publisher doesn't provide, then BiblioShare takes them from that supplier record. But in general, suppliers, distributors are probably using a publisher file without addition. But ultimately, BiblioShare does not update based on the supplier file once the publisher owns the record. We rely on the publisher feed. The one exception is the supply detail, which is owned by the supplier. This is an important consideration if, say, your files contain your US distributor's information and you want that in Catalyst. We can manually set ownership to the publisher on the entire record and exclude the supplier record if it's necessary. That's done on an ISBN level, so it can be very surgical, but it's a manual process where any new ISBN has to be added to the list. In general, we hope that distribution belonging to the supplier is appropriate and will carry their information like discount codes and the price they use and such. The web service accounts are those types of accounts that are looking to pull data from BiblioShare. And we also had 23 new accounts sign up to use BiblioShare Web Form, our ONIX creation tool for smaller companies. With regards to our other content, aside from ONIX data in BiblioShare, we continue to see lots of growth there. Our cover image holdings increased by 6% year over year, adding over 200,000 new covers. Interior images that we ingest and hold grew by 20%, over 80,000 new images to display. And, of course, our slowly growing collection of author images increased by 8% year over year, and we're now sitting at close to 10,000 author images. And here we see that samples, table of contents, reader guides have grown year over year as well. We still have a ways to go here, but just to be clear, we are seeing more and more use cases emerging that require this data, and so if you have it, send it. Well, it is fair to say that one of the biggest users of BiblioShare is BookNet Canada. We use bits and pieces of the dataset all over the place in sales data, Catalyst, plugins, all over the place. But outside of our walls, we know our web services are doing quite a bit of heavy lifting for products and services in other places. 103,544,898 in 2021 successful requests came into our services. Successful in this context simply means that we had the data for the ISBN that was being queried. And all those requests came in from 139 different users. And just to show that it isn't all just for the ONIX that people are using BiblioShare web services for, here are the counts for each of the different services that we have made available. A few drops here and there, but for the most part, we're seeing increased usage across the board. And there, if you look, you can see the Bish Assets service that I mentioned earlier. The main users of this service seem to be using it for the exact reasons I mentioned earlier. And I'm basing this on the fact that I know who is making these requests. And it looks like they're using it for auditing the quality of bibliographic data, auditing to see where missing data is, and gap analysis. So in the case of, say, as I mentioned, a wholesaler wanting to do an analysis on their own data set, they can compare with BiblioShare and see if they're missing material there. And since we don't really charge anything for usage of our web services, the least we can do is share who our top users are. In this case, I left the BookNet usage in the list just so you can see where we line up with others in the industry. I think it gives a really interesting context, and to see that we aren't necessarily the biggest user of our data. There's a lot of reader-bound sites in here, and reader-bound is definitely one of our biggest users, library wholesalers, and a lot of Shopify shops are listed in here. So finally, it's a short presentation this year, but for more details about all of this good free stuff you too could be using, you can follow this link to our documentation on our web services. That's it for this year in BiblioShare. We're hoping to be able to provide a new flat file shortly that will operate similar to our Canadian author file that we distribute. This new file will be created and distributed daily to a public FTP directory. The daily file will contain a list of all new ISBNs that we have received each day. Just one more customer request that we think more than one company will find very useful for all of the reasons. And who knows? Maybe we'll even get to create our very own NFT mascots for BiblioShare. And, as they say, leave them smiling. So in a nutshell, what the year looked like, BiblioShare platform, that is what it looked like for the BiblioShare platform. Going forward, we hope to continue to increase the holdings of 3.0 ONIX data and migrate all of our solutions to supporting 3.0 data. I look forward to seeing you next year, and with more projects and more data coming your way.